Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, and today, as you can see, I am checking in with a garden tour from the JCRA Arboretum here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, as soon as I walked in, I see Canomalies in bloom. I'm not sure which cultivar, might be just Alba. Such beautiful flowers. I don't think any of my flowering quints are in flower yet, but now I'm gonna have to go home and check. Well, look at that Professor Sargent in full glorious flower. And at the base of it, this Edgeworthia looks like it did get some damage from the cold, probably the holiday freeze. This is a hybrid between Edgeworthia pepivera and Edgeworthia chrysantha, one called Snow Globe, and my good friend Tim Alderton is actually the one that found this. So you guys, I totally just crashed midweek from the Ralston Arboretum. They do these awesome Zooms, and it was so much fun to see everybody. So if you're watching this and you were on that, be sure to leave me a comment. That wasn't planned, but as Mark said, all the cool people gather at the Ralston Arboretum. Up, I think most of the Prunus Mumes are just about finished, and they're usually the first of the Prunus to bloom here. But now we are well on our way to getting cherries in bloom, and this looks to be a hybrid similar to Okami Cherry, which is Prunus Companuleta by Prunus Incisa. So it's an interspecific hybrid, and just an overall really great plant. This was originally, that hybrid was gifted to the United States from Japan, and it's a huge part of the Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C. Well, it's definitely hellebore season here, and this is a really interesting hybrid species that I'm not totally familiar with, but I really like these blooms. This is glandoforensis, with a silly cultivar name. That's really quite attractive. Look at those blooms. All right, everybody, I found my bestie, Tim Alderton, and I was saying, oh my gosh, I love this patch of hellebores, and now Tim has explained to me what they are. So you explain to everybody here.
What I understand about these, because it's become much more complex, but these are some modern hybrids of hellebores. They're very complex. They're Eric Smithii hybrids, which Eric Smithii hellebores are Hellebores lividus crossed with Hellebores niger. So the Lenten rose crossed with another smaller, really pretty, adorable one, which they've done really well in the landscape, and they tend to be rather infertile, but apparently they have some fertility left in them. And then they cross them with a hybridus, which is these complex ones, which are a totally different group of hellebores altogether. And for the longest time, that was an impossibility. They figured out how to do it somehow. And these are crossed with that, so you get these really long flowering. This has actually been flowering a few blossoms on this clump here since the end of November. So they flower early, just like the Nigers, and then they have the colors and a little more of the structure, but the flowers are held above the foliage of the hybridus types. And they flower for months and months on end because they are totally sterile. They won't produce a seed at all. They're so far across it. So, from what I understand, anyways. So there's a couple breeders who are doing these now. This is some breeding work out of Germany, from what I understand. So,
thank you for explaining that.
So these are, I should say, what actually they are. So if you see Hellebores glandoforensis, that's what it is. And then you see the name for this cultivar here, which is a fire and ice, and I don't even know which one that is, but it's fire and ice something. I think this was like dark Picati or something like that. But anyways, There's a whole series of these, and they've been doing great for us. We have another pink one over here, softer pink one, and there's some other ones out there that are becoming available. But I highly recommend them. I have a label for these.
So here we've got Prunus Mume Uwa, and this is a variety. Many of my Prunus Mumes are bred by Tom Kernitsky out of Chapel Hill, and this is actually named for his niece. And you see it's definitely coming to the end, but the fragrance is still super strong. And at the base of that is another one of those complex hybrids of glandoforensis. I've not ever seen that species name before, so now I'm going to be really paying attention. And this is a really beautiful pale pink. Oh, I love it. New plant alert to me, new plant. I'll search the internet, you guys, and see if there is a retail mail order link. Maybe Plant Delights. I don't know.
Either that or
Pine Knot.
Pine Knot.
Pine Knot, and Pine Knot is having their Hellebore festival. I will definitely add the Pine Knot link in this video.
Cherry blossoms here that we have at this plant right here. This is one called First Lady. It's Prunus First Lady from the National Arboretum Introductions. I'm guessing this has, it's probably a Prunus incisa crossed with a Prunus Companuleta, but I think it has an extra dose of Companuleta. It is much better color than the common one you see, hybrid that you see of that cross, Okami, which is starting to flower as well here in this area right now. It's a much deeper pink and saturated. So that's why I think it might have an extra dose of Companuleta in it. It's always been a great one for us here, so it's been here since before I've been working here now for 17 years, and so this has been here at least a couple years prior to that, so it's probably almost 20 years in the garden. So, but
And look at all the bees.
Well. Yes.
It's a great day to go out bee spotting, everybody. This is magnificent. Tim's like, oh, you want to see cherries in bloom? Look at this. This one's already leafing out too. So it's way ahead of schedule. Today is what, February 8th?
Something like that. 9th.
9th? Oh my gosh. You know, it's pretty doggone early.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is
Prunus immensis, and this is another National Arboretum selection that we've had in the garden now for several years. And the bark on it is beautiful too.
Yes.
It has wonderful lenticels. And to me, it smells like cherry or almond extract, or as my interns and student workers have said, maraschino.
Maraschino,
And
yes.
Think of that, of course, cherry. So benzaldehyde is the chemical that it smells like. But I love this one in the morning. I can especially smell it. It'll waft through the garden, and it's just a beautiful white at this time of the year. And like Bree has said, it is leafing out. And on this morning on the news, WRAL, our local television station, they were saying the forecast is for leaf out to be about 20 days early this year.
Oof.
So things are changing. So,
yes. Well, I was saying earlier, we have no freezing in the 10-day forecast.
Yeah.
So originally it was going to get chilly like Saturday night,
so they now
but it's up now.
Okay,
yeah.
wonderful.
So, I mean, good and bad, because it doesn't mean we won't have another cold snap, and it could only be, again, like the low 20s.
And it could do major damage.
Yeah, which, I mean, in theory, that's not cold, but when the plants are actively growing, 20 degrees can cause a huge amount of damage. So we've decided this is turning into a Prunus tour. You're welcome, world. So this is Prunus incisa. So I have this planted at my house. I'm positive I got the cuttings from you. And this is Shikozaki.
Yep, Shikozaki.
Yes. And it's just so, I love it so much. So this is half of the species of Okami.
No, I think this is straight incisa.
No. I mean for Okami.
Oh, yes.
This is one of the parents of that. And now Tim is going to show us the other parent.
But this one is really cool. Not all forms of incisa flower this long. There's some that just flower for a few weeks in late winter and spring. But this one has started flowering in November, and it repeats. The flowers aren't as big as some of the others, but it repeats literally it'll have flowers parts of November, December, January, February, March, and sometimes into April. So 5 to 6 months of flowering on one plant. And I actually saw little cherries forming on it last week, but they may have gotten frozen off now. But I've never actually seen any get ripened on this. But
so yeah, I've never had fruit set on mine.
Yeah,
that would be so cool.
It just goes and goes. But like I said, it's not a. I mean, flower-wise, it's not a standout on its own. But being how the longevity of the flowering is the great thing about this one. And it's not a tall plant. It is wide. We call it weeping, but it's not. It's not a strict weeper like so many cherries.
Give people an idea.
One, but height-wise, it'll fit into most landscapes. But width-wise, it is a little bit of a space hog, just because it's low-growing. But I've really adored this plant over the last 10 years or so that we've had it here in the garden.
As have I. Highly recommend. I like Prunus incisa in general. And Koto Namai is another cultivar I like.
Contorted growth in that one.
But Shikazaki is definitely I think it's a great plant. So now Tim's going to show us the other parent of Okami. And a very worthy species in and of itself, not just for breeding. This is Prunus Companuleta. Yeah, this really has nice dark color.
It's not as hardy as Okami flower-wise. So if we have a hard freeze, I was worried we were going to lose it this past weekend flower-wise, but we lucked out and had a milder weekend than I expected. There's a minor damage to some of the open flowers on it, but it is spectacular right now.
It really is.
I believe we got the seed for this either from indirectly or directly from the Taiwan Forestry Institute, where I believe it's native to Taiwan. So it's not necessarily a cold-tolerant cherry. So this is one that's more commonly planted further south. That when you cross it with some forms of incisa, you get a really hardy selections like Okami out of that.
Which we keep talking about Okami. One, the streets of Raleigh are lined with Okami cherries.
Right now,
specifically Western Boulevard through campus. And last week Aiden was like, "Wow, they have a lot of Prunus Mumes here. That's very sophisticated." And I was like, "Yeah, there's no way those can be Prunus Mumes. They're too hard to propagate. These cherries are much easier to propagate from cutting than Prunus Mumes are."
And the shape, the structure, I hate to say, Okami has a wonderful structure.
Yes, and Prunus Mumes are horribly awkward.
They are awkward. They're beautiful when they're in flower, but the rest of the year they're dogs. I hate to say it, but I love them for their winter flowering and fragrance. But the rest of the year, they're okay.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Since I have 5 dominating my landscape, and all of them are awkward in their shape. And Tim gave me really good advice a few years ago, which I've shared with people before. But plants in the Rosaceae family are best to be pruned in the summer to reduce suckering.
But if you have to, I did prune our Prunus Mume Bridal Veil in December, just because I had time, and it was getting to be a haystack. And the structure on it this winter has been wonderful, but I have a feeling this summer I will be having to do some thinning. But I think that's well worth it to catch back up on when I had some time.
Well, that's the thing. You got to be realistic, whether you're a professional gardener or a home gardener. But keep that in mind. I didn't know that rule.
Yeah. I learned it from Ted Bilderback, our former director and retired professor, emeritus professor here at NC State. So.
See, brilliant minds share brilliant information. As we continue our Prunus tour, Tim is taking us to the Bridal Veil Prunus Mume that he painstakingly pruned with his awesome helper, Trace, who is leaving next week. End of the month.
You better not leave next week.
To work with Buddy Lee, a very good friend of ours, the plant breeder behind the Encore Azaleas. So it's an awesome job opportunity.
He's going to be the next breeder for Encore.
Oh my God, that's huge.
And he loves rhododendrons.
So Tim, I have pictures I'm going to insert into this of Aiden and Abby in front of this in full bloom before the pandemic hit in January of 2020. I cannot believe how you have improved the structure of this tree.
It was a big mess. I hadn't pruned it in several years, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And in December of all times, like we were saying, it's not the ideal time to do it, but I could see the structure. And I got in here with Trace Fulbright, and we thinned it out a ton. And you can see the structure now. It looks like a graceful weeping tree now instead of just a haystack.
It's magnificent.
And it's almost done flowering now, but there still are some blossoms on it. And it's been blossoming since the first of the year. And it was blossoming, I think, when I came back from Pennsylvania basically, and back to work the 3rd of January. So, and it's still at it, and a month later.
Oh, it's spectacular. Good job pruning to both of you.
There's a few branches I wish I could have gotten to, but they were just up into too much of an awkward place to get to. We thinned it out a ton.
So another amazing Prunus Mume. I don't have this one in my collection. This is Omi No Mama. And it's really cool because this is a chimera. So meaning it is what, 2 sets of chromosomes. And sometimes the branches are all white. Sometimes the branches are pink. And sometimes...
Ideally, they have pink and white on the same flower.
And you actually see this chimera trait in a lot of camellias as well. But I happen to love it. This is the only Prunus Mume I know that does this. All others are kind of solid color. So I'm glad you guys have this. This year, I am on a mission to collect Prunus Mume cuttings, like in April, and hopefully get some cool varieties propagated. This is on my list. And so to conclude part 1 of the tour here at the JCRA Arboretum, I wanted to show you another fabulous Prunus. This is Brunos Jackmania, which is also known as the Afghan bush cherry. And as you can see, it's only about 6 foot tall and maybe 10 foot wide. And it's really just starting to flower now. And the flowers are just a beautiful soft pink. They're wonderful in cut flower arrangements, and it's definitely a sign that spring isn't too far off. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tour, and be sure to stay tuned tomorrow for part 2, where I continue to show you awesome plants that are growing here at the JCRA Arboretum. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.